Nobody aboard United Flight 2847 knew that the quiet woman in jeans sitting in seat 12C was Captain Maya Viper Rivers, one of America's deadliest F-22 Raptor pilots, until their captain's heart stopped beating at 37,000 feet and 273 passengers needed a miracle that only her elite combat training could deliver. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The clock reads 2:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, March 12, 2025, when United Airlines Flight 2847 cuts through crystalline sky at 37,000 feet, the massive Boeing 777 carrying 273 souls from Boston's Logan International to Los Angeles International Airport. The afternoon sun blazes through passenger windows as the aircraft maintains its smooth westward track across America's heartland, 5 hours into what should be a routine 6-hour cross-country journey that thousands of passengers make every week without incident. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Chen, 22 years with United, 15,000 flight hours logged across every aircraft type in the fleet, monitors instruments with the practiced ease of a veteran who's flown this exact route hundreds of times before. His experienced hands resting casually on controls while autopilot manages the straightforward cruising phase that requires only periodic attention and routine communication with air traffic control. "Course looks good, Bob," First Officer Jason Rodriguez says, adjusting altitude trim with minor inputs that fine-tune their westward trajectory. Rodriguez is younger, only 5 years with United and 3,000 hours in his logbook, still building the experience that separates competent pilots from truly seasoned aviators who've weathered every possible flight condition. He's grateful to be paired with Chen today. The captain's reputation as an exceptional mentor makes every flight a learning opportunity, and Rodriguez has absorbed countless operational insights from watching how Chen manages both routine operations and the occasional complications that inevitably arise during commercial aviation. Weather ahead looks clear all the way to LA. Should be smooth sailing from here. Chen nods, reaching for his coffee cup while scanning the engine instruments that show all 4 massive turbofans operating within perfect parameters. Nice change from yesterday's approach into Boston. That crosswind landing was. The sentence dies midword as Chen's face suddenly contorts, his features twisting with shock and agony that transforms his relaxed expression into a mask of pure pain. His right hand releases the coffee cup, which tumbles through the cockpit in slow motion while his left hand claws at his chest, fingers digging into his uniform shirt as though trying to physically tear out whatever invisible force is crushing his ribcage from inside. Rodriguez watches in horror as his captain's eyes go wide with terror and confusion, as the experienced aviator who was calmly discussing yesterday's landing suddenly gasps for air like a drowning man, as the face that was relaxed and confident seconds ago turns ashen gray while sweat erupts across Chen's forehead in a sudden sheen of moisture that signals catastrophic medical crisis. Bob. What's wrong?" Rodriguez reaches toward his captain even as his mind struggles to process what he's witnessing, even as years of training scream warnings about cardiac events and medical emergencies, even as he realizes with mounting horror that Captain Chen is having a heart attack right here at 37,000 feet with 273 lives depending on their professional competence and stable flight operations. Chen tries to speak but only a strangled gasp emerges, his body convulsing as the massive coronary infarction tears through his cardiovascular system with devastating force. His hands lose coordination, the left still clutching uselessly at his chest while the right flails outward and strikes the control yoke, sending the autopilot disconnect warning shrieking through the cockpit as the aircraft's computer systems detect unexpected control inputs that override automated flight management. The captain's body pitches forward with dead weight, his unconscious form slumping against the restraint harness while his head drops toward the instrument panel in a collapse that signals complete loss of consciousness and possibly something far worse. Rodriguez feels ice water flood his veins as reality crashes down with terrible clarity. His captain is dying beside him, the aircraft is now manually controlled because of Chen's inadvertent disconnect, and he's suddenly solely responsible for 273 lives while simultaneously facing a medical emergency that requires immediate intervention. His hands move on pure training, grabbing the yoke to stabilize the aircraft that's beginning a shallow bank from Chen's uncontrolled input, but his mind races with impossible calculations about how to simultaneously fly a massive commercial jet, provide medical assistance to his dying captain, communicate the emergency to air traffic control, and manage the crisis without letting any single element spiral into catastrophe. Bob! Captain Chen! Rodriguez shouts while fighting to push his captain's limp body back from the controls where his deadweight is interfering with flight systems, where his unconscious form threatens to strike critical instruments or controls, where the physical bulk of a full-grown man slumped forward creates obstacles that make operating the aircraft nearly impossible from the first officer's position. The aircraft requires constant attention. They're traveling at 520 miles per hour at an altitude where loss of cabin pressure would render everyone unconscious within seconds, where any significant deviation from proper flight parameters could cascade into disaster, where the margin for error shrinks to nothing when only one pilot remains conscious to manage systems designed for two-person crews. Rodriguez manages to level the aircraft and re-engage autopilot with shaking hands, buying himself precious seconds to address the medical emergency, but he knows the reprieve is temporary. Autopilot handles routine flight but can't manage emergencies, can't make the complex decisions about diversion airports and emergency descent, can't communicate with air traffic control or coordinate the dozens of tasks that crisis situations demand from flight crews. He reaches for Chen's neck with 2 fingers, searching for a carotid pulse while simultaneously scanning instruments to ensure the aircraft remains stable, and his heart sinks when he feels only a weak, irregular flutter that suggests his captain's cardiovascular system is failing catastrophically. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Denver Center, United 2847, we have an in-flight medical emergency. Captain is incapacitated. Requesting immediate priority handling and vectors to nearest suitable airport. Rodriguez's voice cracks with barely controlled panic as he transmits the emergency declaration, as he realizes that speaking those words makes the nightmare real, as air traffic controllers hundreds of miles away now know that Flight 2847 has lost its aircraft commander and the first officer is desperately trying to manage alone. United 2847, Denver Center copies your mayday. Squawk 7700. We're showing you currently over central Kansas. Nearest suitable airport is Wichita, about 60 miles south of your position. Medical facilities standing by. What is the nature of the captain's medical emergency? The controller's voice carries professional calm that barely masks concern. Mayday calls from commercial flights are rare events that trigger massive emergency response coordination. Appears to be cardiac arrest. Captain unconscious, weak pulse. I need immediate assistance in the cockpit. Rodriguez fumbles for the intercom while keeping one hand on Chen's shoulder, as though physical contact might somehow prevent his captain from dying, as though touching the unconscious man will transfer strength or will or life force that medical science says is already draining away. Senior flight attendant to the cockpit immediately. Medical emergency. I repeat, medical emergency in the cockpit. The cockpit door crashes open within 30 seconds as Jessica Martinez, senior flight attendant with 14 years of service, rushes in with the emergency medical kit that flight attendants train to use but pray they'll never need. Her professional composure shatters when she sees Captain Chen slumped unconscious, when she realizes the magnitude of crisis facing her flight crew, when understanding hits that the young first officer is trying to fly this massive aircraft alone while his captain potentially dies beside him. Oh God! Is he? Martinez's question dies as she sees Chen's gray pallor, the sweat-soaked uniform, the completely unresponsive state that suggests catastrophic medical crisis. Possible heart attack. I need you to start CPR immediately while I fly the aircraft and coordinate emergency landing. Rodriguez's voice steadies as he shifts into crisis management mode, as years of training override panic, as he realizes that showing fear will only make this situation worse for the 273 people depending on his professional competence. Martinez immediately begins chest compressions on Chen while he's still strapped in his seat, the grotesque difficulty of performing proper CPR in the confined cockpit space making the procedure nearly impossible. She has to lean awkwardly over the captain's chair, pressing down through the restraint harness that interferes with proper hand placement, trying to generate enough force to manually pump Chen's failing heart while the aircraft rocks gently through minor turbulence that makes maintaining position and rhythm nearly impossible. Sweat pours down her face as she counts compressions, as her arms burn with effort, as she realizes that she's literally holding another human being's life in her hands through the mechanical pumping that substitutes for the captain's failing cardiovascular system. Rodriguez watches from the corner of his eye while managing aircraft systems, and the sight of his captain receiving emergency CPR in the seat beside him feels surreal and nightmarish. He's supposed to be learning from Chen's expertise, supposed to be gradually building experience under his captain's mentorship, supposed to be handling routine communications while Chen manages the broader strategic decisions that aircraft commanders make. Instead, he's the only conscious pilot on a flight carrying 273 souls, coordinating with air traffic control for emergency descent, and watching his mentor receive desperate medical intervention that may or may not save his life. United 2847, Denver Center has you cleared direct Wichita. Descend and maintain flight level 250. Emergency services are standing by. We've notified medical facilities and they're preparing for priority landing. The controller's voice carries urgency now, the professional detachment cracking as controllers realize they're managing a genuine crisis where the aircraft commander is down and a young first officer is struggling to handle everything alone. Cleared direct Wichita, descending to flight level 250, United 2847. Rodriguez acknowledges while beginning the descent procedure, his hands moving across controls with mechanical precision even as his mind screams about everything that could go wrong, about how he's never landed at Wichita before, about how Chen always handled the complex weather assessments and approach planning that Rodriguez is now solely responsible for executing correctly. Martinez continues CPR with grim determination, her arms shaking with exhaustion as she maintains the rhythm that might keep Chen alive long enough to reach hospital care. I need someone else. I can't maintain compressions all the way to landing, she gasps between counts, her breath coming in ragged pants from the physical exertion. Rodriguez makes the decision that will change everything, reaching for the passenger address system with one hand while the other maintains aircraft control. His voice sounds strained and barely controlled when it emerges through cabin speakers, carrying to every seat in the aircraft with a message that will send terror through 263 passengers who believed their flight was routine and unremarkable. Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Rodriguez. We are experiencing a medical emergency in the cockpit. Captain Chen has suffered what appears to be a heart attack and is currently incapacitated. I am requesting immediate assistance from any passengers with pilot qualifications or advanced medical training. This is an urgent request. If you have pilot qualifications of any kind, please identify yourself to the flight attendants immediately. We are diverting to Wichita for emergency landing and medical evacuation. The cabin erupts in shocked murmurs and frightened whispers as 263 passengers process the horrifying implications. Their captain is down, a young first officer who sounds terrified is now solely responsible for their lives, and the desperate plea for pilot assistance suggests the situation exceeds what single pilot operations can safely manage. Parents instinctively pull children closer. Business travelers who've logged millions of miles suddenly realize that routine flights can turn deadly without warning. Elderly passengers who remember when aviation was more dangerous clutch armrests and whisper prayers. The illusion of safety that commercial aviation carefully cultivates has shattered in an instant, replaced by raw fear as everyone aboard understands they're in genuine crisis at 37,000 feet with no guarantee of safe outcome. In Seat 12C, halfway back in economy class, Captain Maya, Viper, Rivers has been sitting quietly throughout the flight in jeans, a casual navy blue jacket, and comfortable Nike running shoes that give absolutely no indication of military service or aviation expertise. She's been reading a novel on her tablet during the journey, occasionally accepting beverage service from flight attendants with polite smiles, exchanging brief pleasantries with the businessmen in 12B about turbulence or weather without revealing anything about her professional background. To everyone around her, she's just another passenger making the cross-country journey from Boston to LA, perhaps a young professional heading home after business trip, maybe a graduate student traveling between coasts, possibly someone visiting family. Nothing about her appearance or demeanor suggests she's anything other than an ordinary traveler among hundreds making this routine flight. The reality is so different from appearances that it seems almost fictional. Maya Rivers is a United States Marine Corps captain, but not just any Marine officer. She's an F-22 Raptor pilot, one of the most elite aviators in the entire world, flying the most advanced stealth fighter ever developed by human engineering. She's passed selection processes so rigorous that fewer than 1% of applicants ever earn F-22 qualification. She's completed training that pushed her physical and mental capabilities to absolute limits. She's logged hundreds of hours in a $150 million aircraft that represents the pinnacle of American air superiority technology. Her tactical aviation expertise and emergency procedure training make commercial airline operations seem straightforward by comparison to the combat scenarios she routinely trains for and executes. Her career has involved carrier operations where she landed F-22s on moving platforms in darkness and adverse weather, combat missions where split-second decisions meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, tactical flying under conditions so extreme that most commercial pilots couldn't imagine surviving the stress, and emergency procedures that prepared her for scenarios where equipment failures and hostile aircraft combined to create situations that would overwhelm anyone without her specific elite training. The call sign, Viper, came from her reputation for lightning-fast tactical decisions and strikes executed with precision that left superior officers and fellow pilots in awe of her capabilities. She's the person they send when missions require absolute certainty of success, when failure means consequences that extend far beyond personal survival, when only the best of the best can handle the operational demands. Maya's internal conflict is immediate and intense as Rodriguez's desperate announcement echoes through the cabin. Revealing her military status means ending the anonymity she carefully maintains while traveling, accepting responsibility she never asked for, and exposing her identity as a Marine F-22 pilot when she's simply trying to travel home quietly to visit her mother in Los Angeles without drawing the attention her rank and qualifications inevitably attract. She treasures the rare moments when she can simply exist as Maya rather than Captain Rivers, when she can read novels and drink coffee without being recognized as a combat aviator, when she can travel without the constant awareness that her uniform and rank create distance between herself and civilians who view military service with everything from admiration to discomfort to political disagreement. But the strain in Rodriguez's voice cuts through her desire for privacy with the clarity of a tactical warning system. That's a first officer in genuine crisis, possibly overwhelmed beyond his training, facing an emergency that could cascade into disaster if he doesn't receive help from someone with aviation expertise sufficient to share the overwhelming burden. 273 lives depend on someone stepping forward, and she knows with absolute certainty that her F-22 qualifications mean she's not just capable of helping but specifically more qualified than anyone else likely aboard this aircraft, including the incapacitated captain. Her Marine Corps oath supersedes personal preference. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, means serving even when it's inconvenient, even when it exposes her to attention she'd rather avoid, even when duty demands sacrifice of the privacy and normalcy she rarely gets to experience. She's a Marine before she's anything else, and Marines don't remain seated when people need help that their training provides. Maya unbuckles with quiet determination that immediately transforms her bearing from casual passenger to something else entirely. Her movements become precise and purposeful, her posture shifts to the ramrod military bearing that years of service have ingrained as second nature, her eyes scan the cabin with tactical assessment that evaluates threats and resources with automatic competence. The businessman in 12B notices the change and actually recoils slightly, sensing something dangerous and controlled emerging from the woman who was casually reading moments before. She approaches the senior flight attendant stationed at the mid-cabin position with calm authority that immediately signals she's not an ordinary passenger offering help. "I'm qualified to provide assistance to your flight crew. I need access to the cockpit immediately." Her voice carries command presence that makes the flight attendant straighten instinctively, recognizing leadership that transcends civilian hierarchy. "Ma'am, do you have pilot qualifications?" The flight attendant's professional training demands verification even as her desperate hope shows clearly. "Please let this passenger be genuinely qualified, please let help have arrived, please let this nightmare have a solution. I'm Captain Maya Rivers, United States Marine Corps, F-22 Raptor pilot. I hold military aircraft commander qualification and advanced tactical aviation certifications that exceed commercial pilot requirements. I'm qualified to assist your first officer with emergency operations. Take me to the cockpit now." Maya's tone brooks no argument, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in combat situations where hesitation costs lives. The flight attendant's eyes go wide with shock and profound relief. They expected perhaps a private pilot or retired commercial aviator, not an active-duty military fighter pilot, and certainly not someone flying the most advanced combat aircraft in existence. "Follow me, Captain," she says immediately, leading Maya forward while her mind reels from the impossible good fortune of having a legitimate military expert aboard during crisis. Passengers nearby overhear, F-22 pilot, and the whispers spread through economy class like wildfire. People crane their necks to watch the young woman in civilian clothes being escorted toward the cockpit with urgency that signals genuine expertise has arrived. Some passengers recognize F-22 as representing elite military aviation even if they don't understand the specific aircraft. Others simply hear the confidence in Maya's voice and feel their terror diminishing slightly because someone who sounds competent is taking charge. A few veterans among the passengers feel tears of relief because they know exactly what F-22 qualification means, and they understand that the cavalry just arrived in the form of one Marine captain carrying capabilities that far exceed this emergency's demands. Maya enters the cockpit and her tactical assessment is instant and comprehensive: dying captain receiving CPR from exhausted flight attendant, overwhelmed first officer attempting to manage aircraft alone while stress radiates from every line of his body, and flight systems showing minor deviations that indicate single pilot operations during crisis aren't maintaining optimal parameters. Her F-22 training processes the scenario in microseconds, identifying priorities and solutions with the speed that combat aviation demands when hostile aircraft close at supersonic speeds, and decisions must be made before conscious thought can complete its slower analysis. First Officer: I'm Captain Maya Rivers, United States Marine Corps, F-22 Raptor pilot. I'm qualified to assist you with aircraft operations and emergency coordination. Give me a status report and we'll stabilize this situation together. Her voice cuts through the cockpit chaos with calm authority that transforms Rodriguez's isolation into partnership, her Marine Corps command presence immediately establishing her as a legitimate aircraft authority rather than interfering passenger. Rodriguez's head snaps around and his expression shows profound relief, transforming the panic that's been building since Chen collapsed. He's no longer alone managing an impossible crisis but suddenly coordinating with someone whose aviation qualifications clearly exceed his own commercial training based on how she's already scanning instruments and assessing the situation with tactical precision. Captain Chen collapsed about 6 minutes ago, appears to be cardiac arrest. We're diverting to Wichita, currently descending through flight level 310. I've got aircraft control but I need help managing communications and systems. His voice steadies as he explains their situation, as hope replaces desperation, as professional aviator coordination replaces his solo struggle against overwhelming circumstances. Copy that. I'm taking the right seat and I'll manage systems coordination while you maintain aircraft control and communications. You're doing great, we're going to get everyone on the ground safely. Maya slides into the co-pilot's seat, her hands moving across commercial aircraft controls with competence that comes from someone whose flight training included far more complex systems than any civilian airliner ever incorporates. F-22 cockpits make commercial aircraft seem simple by comparison. She's accustomed to managing stealth systems, tactical weapons interfaces, advanced threat detection, and flight controls simultaneously while executing combat maneuvers that push the aircraft to its performance limits. A Boeing 777 in emergency descent is straightforward compared to combat scenarios she trains for monthly. She immediately establishes systematic emergency management with military precision that transforms the chaotic cockpit into controlled operations. Flight attendant: maintain CPR compressions but rotate with another crew member every 2 minutes to prevent exhaustion. Get your strongest people up here because quality compressions are critical for his survival. First Officer Rodriguez: continue your descent to Wichita and maintain communication with ATC while I coordinate medical procedures and aircraft systems. I'll handle fuel calculations, approach planning, and emergency checklist coordination. Martinez gasps with relief as another flight attendant rushes into the cockpit to rotate CPR duties, her arms burning with lactic acid after 6 minutes of continuous compressions. Maya monitors Chen's condition with clinical assessment while simultaneously scanning flight instruments and calculating approach requirements. Her tactical aviation background processes multiple simultaneous emergencies with ease that commercial aviation rarely demands but combat operations routinely require. Denver Center, United 2847. We have an additional qualified pilot assisting in the cockpit. Military aviator with aircraft commander qualifications. Continuing descent to Wichita. Rodriguez transmits with newfound confidence, his voice steady now that he's coordinating with professional backup. The controller's response carries obvious relief. United 2847, excellent news. We're coordinating with military liaison for any additional support requirements. Wichita approach is ready to expedite your arrival. Medical team standing by. Maya pulls up the approach plates for Wichita on the electronic flight bag display, calculating optimal descent profile while monitoring fuel status and weather conditions with the rapid tactical analysis that F-22 operations demand. Her mind processes the emergency landing requirements with automatic competence. They need straight-in approach to minimize time before medical evacuation, maximum priority from air traffic control to avoid any delays, and perfect execution of landing procedures despite the crisis conditions that have stressed everyone aboard to their breaking points. First officer, let's plan for straight-in ILS approach to runway 1 right, full emergency services. I'm calculating optimal descent profile now. Maya's fingers move across the flight management system with decisive confidence, programming approach parameters while simultaneously monitoring Chen's medical status and coordinating with the flight attendants providing CPR. Rodriguez watches in amazement as Maya manages what seemed impossible moments ago, coordinating medical care, aircraft operations, emergency communications, and approach planning simultaneously with calm efficiency that makes the overwhelming crisis seem manageable. Her hands move across controls with muscle memory precision, her voice remains steady while issuing instructions and assessments, her tactical decision-making operates at speeds that transform chaos into organized response that addresses every critical element without neglecting any detail. How are compressions looking? Maya asks the flight attendant currently performing CPR, her eyes never leaving the instrument panel while her situational awareness encompasses everything happening in the confined cockpit space. I think I'm getting good depth. He's still got a weak pulse but it's hanging on, the flight attendant gasps between compressions, sweat pouring down her face from the exhausting physical effort. Excellent. Keep maintaining quality compressions. Every minute we keep blood flowing to his brain increases his survival chances. Rodriguez, how's our descent profile looking? Maya transitions seamlessly between medical coordination and flight operations, her brain compartmentalizing the separate emergency elements with the multitasking capability that F-22 pilots develop through training scenarios where threats emerge from multiple vectors simultaneously while aircraft systems require constant management. Looking good. We're on profile for Wichita arrival in approximately 12 minutes. Rodriguez has shifted from overwhelmed solo pilot to effective crew member coordinating with someone whose capabilities obviously exceed his experience level, and the transformation has stabilized not just the aircraft but his mental state as the panic that threatened to overwhelm him gives way to professional focus on managing his assigned tasks. Maya establishes direct communication with Wichita approach control with tactical clarity that immediately signals to controllers they're now coordinating with military aviation professional. Wichita approach, United 2847 declaring full emergency. We have one pilot incapacitated with cardiac arrest receiving CPR, we're requesting straight-in approach to longest runway with full emergency services standing by. We have qualified military pilot assisting in cockpit. All passengers secure. Aircraft is fully controllable and all systems operating normally. United 2847, Wichita approach. Copy your full emergency. Cleared straight-in ILS approach runway 1 right. All traffic is being held clear. Emergency services in position. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. You're cleared to descend to 5,000 feet. The controller's voice carries professional respect that suggests they recognize the tactical communication style of someone with military aviation background. Maya acknowledges while calculating final approach speeds and configuration changes with the precision that F-22 landing procedures demand. Stealth fighters operate with far tighter margins than commercial aircraft, and her training in carrier operations prepared her for approaches that make commercial landings seem almost leisurely by comparison. She's put F-22s on carrier decks in night conditions with crosswinds that would ground commercial flights. She's executed emergency landings after simulated engine failures and hydraulic problems that created scenarios far more demanding than what they're facing now. Rodriguez, let's plan gear down at 8 miles, full flaps at 5 miles, final approach speed 135 knots. I'll call configurations and you maintain aircraft control. We're going to make this textbook smooth despite the circumstances. Maya's command presence establishes clear crew coordination that transforms two pilots into an efficient team despite never having flown together before this emergency. The aircraft descends through wispy clouds as Wichita approaches, the city sprawling below with the airport clearly visible in afternoon sunlight that makes visual approach straightforward. Maya monitors every system parameter while Rodriguez hand-flies the aircraft with steady inputs, the first officer's confidence growing as he realizes that genuine expert backup means he can focus on flying rather than managing every emergency element simultaneously. United 2847, you're cleared to land runway 1 right. Emergency services are standing by. Wichita Tower clears them for landing with calm professionalism that masks the intense coordination happening behind the scenes as fire trucks, ambulances, and emergency personnel position to provide immediate support the moment the aircraft stops. Cleared to land runway 1 right, United 2847. Rodriguez acknowledges while Maya calls out configurations and approach parameters with tactical precision. Gear down. 3 green. Flaps 30. Speed 145, on profile. Looking good, Rodriguez. Hold this approach angle and we'll have a smooth touchdown. Maya's voice carries the calm confidence of someone for whom emergency operations are routine rather than exceptional, for whom crisis management is what she trains for constantly rather than fears might someday occur. The Boeing 777 settles toward the runway with mechanical precision as Rodriguez executes the approach exactly as Maya coordinates, the massive aircraft floating over the threshold before the main landing gear kisses concrete with the gentle touchdown that comes from perfect speed and descent rate management. Rodriguez deploys thrust reversers and applies brakes with smooth professionalism, bringing 273 people safely to ground after an emergency that could have ended catastrophically if he'd been managing alone without Maya's tactical expertise and command presence transforming his solo struggle into effective crew coordination. Emergency vehicles race alongside as the aircraft slows, their lights flashing in silent readiness to provide immediate medical evacuation. Maya coordinates the shutdown procedures while paramedics rush aboard, professional emergency medical technicians taking over CPR from exhausted flight attendants and immediately beginning advanced cardiac life support that gives Chen his best chance of surviving the massive coronary infarction that nearly killed him at 37,000 feet. You did great, Rodriguez. That was professional flying under terrible circumstances. Your captain would be proud. Maya unbuckles and moves aside as paramedics maneuver Chen's unconscious form onto a gurney, the captain's gray pallor and the urgent efficiency of medical personnel making clear his condition remains critical despite their successful emergency landing. Rodriguez's eyes are wet as he watches his mentor being rushed toward the waiting ambulance. Thank you, Captain. I couldn't have managed this alone. I was losing it before you arrived. His voice breaks with emotion as adrenaline fades and the reality of what they just survived hits with delayed impact. You were handling it. You kept the aircraft stable, you coordinated with ATC, you made all the right decisions. My presence just gave you backup so you could focus on flying rather than managing everything simultaneously. You're a good pilot, Rodriguez. Remember that. Maya's hand rests briefly on his shoulder with the kind of professional respect that one aviator shows another after successfully managing crisis together. The cabin erupts in applause as Maya emerges from the cockpit, 263 passengers rising to their feet with tears streaming down faces as they understand that this young woman in civilian clothes just saved every single life aboard through expertise and competence that transformed terror into safety. Flight attendants hug her with sobbing gratitude, business travelers shake her hand with awestruck respect, parents hold children up to see the hero who brought them safely home, and elderly passengers weep openly at the realization that they're alive specifically because a Marine F-22 pilot happened to be sitting in seat 12C when catastrophe struck. You're the F-22 pilot. An Air Force veteran in his 70s approaches with tears running down his weathered face, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for your service, Captain. You just proved everything I ever believed about why we maintain the finest military aviation in the world. You brought honor to your service and saved all of us. Maya feels deeply uncomfortable with the attention, with the cameras filming through passenger windows, with the recognition that violates the anonymity she treasures during personal travel. I just did what any qualified pilot would do, sir. Your first officer deserves the real credit. He managed an impossible situation with professionalism and kept everyone safe until additional help arrived. But passengers aren't having it. They know they were in genuine crisis, they heard the terror in Rodriguez's voice when he announced the emergency. They understand that the margin between survival and disaster was measured in the specific expertise that one Marine captain brought to the cockpit when her combat aviation training proved essential for commercial emergency management that exceeded what standard commercial aviation training prepared the first officer to handle alone. Airline personnel rush aboard as passengers deplane through emergency doors, United Airlines management immediately recognizing they had one of America's most elite aviators sitting quietly in coach throughout the emergency. The station manager approaches Maya with profound gratitude while airport personnel coordinate logistics around the stranded aircraft and its 273 passengers who need accommodation until replacement crew can arrive to continue their journey to Los Angeles. Captain Rivers, United Airlines owes you an enormous debt. We'd like to coordinate proper recognition for. I'd prefer you didn't, Maya interrupts firmly. I helped because people needed assistance and I was qualified to provide it. That's what any pilot does when crisis happens. I don't need recognition or attention, and I'd appreciate discretion about my involvement. I'm trying to visit my mother in LA, not become a media story. But even as she requests privacy, Maya knows it's futile. Passengers are already posting on social media about the Marine F-22 pilot who saved Flight 2847, videos of her emerging from the cockpit are spreading across the internet. And news outlets are picking up the story of the dramatic mid-flight emergency and the military aviator whose elite combat training proved essential for survival of 273 people who believed they were taking a routine commercial flight across America. Military liaison officers arrive within the hour, Marine Corps personnel who coordinate her return to duty while managing the public affairs implications of one of their F-22 pilots becoming an instant celebrity for saving a commercial flight. Maya briefs them with tactical precision about the emergency procedures and coordination with civilian air traffic control, her after-action report delivered with the same professional competence she shows when debriefing combat training missions where F-22 capabilities are pushed to their limits in scenarios that test every aspect of her abilities. Captain Rivers, the Commandant asked me to convey his personal appreciation for your actions today. You brought tremendous honor to the Marine Corps and the F-22 community. The senior liaison officer's pride shows clearly in his voice, in his bearing, in the respect that one Marine shows another when exceptional service deserves recognition even when the individual prefers to avoid attention. I appreciate that, sir, but I simply applied my training when circumstances demanded. Any qualified pilot would have done the same. Maya maintains the modest professionalism that defines her character, refusing to accept hero status for what she considers basic duty performance when lives needed saving and her expertise provided the necessary capabilities. News reaches them an hour later that Captain Chen survived. The immediate medical care and rapid landing gave him the crucial window that saved his life when the massive heart attack could easily have been fatal without the coordinated emergency response that brought the aircraft to ground and advanced cardiac care within 20 minutes of his initial collapse. He'll undergo surgery and face months of recovery, but he'll survive to see his grandchildren grow up, survive to fly again if medical clearance permits, survive specifically because Maya Rivers brought military precision to commercial emergency management that bought him the time that meant the difference between life and death. Rodriguez visits Maya in the airport terminal where she's waiting for the next available flight to Los Angeles, the young first officer's gratitude obvious in every line of his body as he approaches the woman who transformed his nightmare into successful emergency management. "Captain Rivers, I wanted to thank you properly. I was so far over my head when Captain Chen collapsed. I honestly thought I was going to lose the aircraft. Then you walked into that cockpit and suddenly everything became manageable. I've never seen anyone coordinate like that, the way you handled medical care, aircraft operations, communications, approach planning, all simultaneously without any of it seeming difficult. That was something beyond anything I've ever witnessed." Maya sees the awestruck respect in his eyes and feels profoundly uncomfortable with the hero worship that she neither wants nor feels she deserves. "Rodriguez, you kept that aircraft stable and made all the correct decisions before I ever arrived in the cockpit. You declared the emergency, you coordinated with ATC, you initiated descent procedures. My arrival just gave you someone to share the workload that's genuinely too much for one person during crisis. You're the one who deserves credit for professional performance under terrible circumstances. But the way you just took command. The way you processed everything so fast and made it look easy. I've been flying for 5 years and I couldn't manage what you did like it was routine." Rodriguez struggles to articulate what he witnessed, capabilities that exceeded anything his commercial aviation training prepared him to recognize. "I fly F-22s, Rodriguez. My routine training involves scenarios where hostile aircraft are trying to kill me, where equipment failures happen simultaneously with tactical threats, where split-second decisions determine whether missions succeed or everyone dies. Your emergency was serious and required professional response, but nothing about it exceeded standard emergency procedures that military aviation trains for constantly. You didn't have crisis management training for pilot incapacitation because commercial aviation rarely faces that scenario. I have crisis management training for situations far more complex because combat aviation faces those scenarios routinely. Different training for different operational environments, that's all you witnessed." Maya tries to normalize what Rodriguez perceives as exceptional, tries to explain that her competence comes from training rather than inherent superiority. But Rodriguez shakes his head, understanding but not quite accepting the explanation. "I'm just grateful you were aboard, Captain. And I'm grateful that our country has people like you defending it with that level of expertise. Knowing that F-22 pilots have capabilities that far exceed what I witnessed today makes me feel a lot better about national defense." Maya smiles despite her discomfort with the praise. "We train hard so we're ready when needed. Today just happened to be when those capabilities proved useful in civilian context. I'm glad I could help, and I'm glad your captain is going to survive. Take care of yourself, Rodriguez. You're a good pilot, don't let this emergency make you doubt your abilities." 3 days later, Maya finally reaches her mother's home in Los Angeles after the media storm forces her to travel under military escort to avoid the reporters and camera crews who've turned her cross-country flight emergency into a national news story that dominates cable networks and social media platforms with endless analysis of the dramatic rescue. Her mother embraces her at the door with tears streaming down weathered cheeks, holding her daughter tight while whispering gratitude to God and the Marine Corps for training that saved 273 lives and brought Maya safely through yet another crisis that most people never face even once in their lifetimes. "I saw you on television, Mija. Everyone saw you. The whole country is talking about what you did." Her mother's pride shines through the concern that never quite leaves her eyes whenever Maya visits, the pride that her daughter serves with such distinction, the concern that combat aviation carries risks that could someday mean a visit from Marines in dress uniforms bearing terrible news. "I know, Mama. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted to come see you quietly." Maya sinks into her childhood couch with exhaustion that goes beyond physical tiredness, the emotional weight of unwanted celebrity settling on shoulders already carrying the burden of military service and the constant pressure that comes from flying the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. Her phone buzzes constantly with messages from fellow F-22 pilots, from Marine Corps leadership, from pilots across all services who recognize the honor she brought to military aviation through her professional response to civilian emergency. The fighter pilot community is small and tight-knit, and word has spread through every squadron and air base that one of their own stepped forward when crisis demanded and proved that elite training translates to any aviation context where expertise means the difference between disaster and survival. One message stands out from the others, sent from call sign Hammer, a fellow F-22 pilot from her squadron who she's flown countless training missions with and who understands her preference for operational privacy better than most people ever could. Viper, you made us all proud. The whole community knows what you did. We're planning something special when you get back to base. Also, you're never living down being the hero pilot in 12C. That's your new call sign whether you like it or not. Maya laughs despite herself, recognizing the affectionate ribbing that fighter pilots use to acknowledge exceptional performance while maintaining the egalitarian culture that prevents any individual from getting too comfortable with praise. Call signs change when pilots do something memorable, and saving a commercial flight definitely qualifies as memorable enough to earn new designation even if her actual call sign, Viper, has stuck for 3 years through dozens of combat training exercises and actual missions that remain classified beyond what she can discuss even with her mother. The news coverage continues for days with aviation experts analyzing her response, with commercial pilots discussing the unique challenges of mid-flight captain incapacitation, with military aviation analysts explaining F-22 qualifications and the elite training that produces pilots capable of managing any aircraft emergency with competence that exceeds what standard commercial aviation training provides. Some coverage makes her uncomfortable with how it elevates her individual contribution while minimizing Rodriguez's professional performance under terrible circumstances, how it treats her as superhuman rather than simply well-trained, how it focuses on her gender as though female combat pilots remain novelty rather than routine reality in modern military aviation. But other coverage captures something important that Maya reluctantly acknowledges has value beyond her personal discomfort. It shows civilians what military training produces, it demonstrates that defense spending creates capabilities that prove valuable even in non-combat contexts. It inspires young people considering military service by proving that elite aviation training develops competence that translates to any crisis requiring tactical decision-making and professional execution under pressure. She receives letters from teenage girls who saw her story and decided to pursue military aviation careers, from parents thanking her for showing their daughters that women can excel at the highest levels of combat aviation, from veterans proud that one of their own proved that Marines adapt and overcome regardless of circumstances or context. The Marine Corps coordinates a formal recognition ceremony 3 weeks later at her home base, attended by senior leadership who understand that Maya's actions reflect the institutional training that produces aviators capable of exceptional performance when circumstances demand capabilities beyond what routine operations require. The commandant himself presents her with a commendation for her professional response to civilian emergency, speaking words that acknowledge her preference for privacy while recognizing that exceptional service deserves formal recognition regardless of individual preference for avoiding attention. Captain Rivers, your actions aboard Flight 2847 brought honor to the Marine Corps, to the F-22 community, and to military aviation as a whole. You demonstrated that our training produces not just combat aviators but professionals capable of applying their expertise to any crisis where lives depend on competence and courage. Every Marine takes pride in your service, and every American owes you debt for saving 273 lives through the skills we invest enormous resources to develop in our finest aviators. The commandant's words echo across the assembled formation of Marines standing at attention, his voice carrying the weight of institutional pride in one captain who proved that military training creates value that extends far beyond combat operations. Maya stands at attention accepting recognition she never wanted, accepting celebrity that violates her preference for operational anonymity, accepting that her actions created consequences beyond her control regardless of how much she'd prefer to simply be known as competent pilot rather than hero pilot. She thinks about Captain Chen recovering in hospital, about Rodriguez who survived his worst nightmare through professional performance that deserves recognition equal to her own, about 273 passengers who continued their lives because aviation training and emergency procedures worked exactly as designed when crisis struck without warning. After the ceremony, her squadron throws an informal gathering at the officers' club where fellow F-22 pilots toast her with the irreverent humor that defines fighter pilot culture. They rename one of the ready room seats, 12C, and designate it as her permanent position during briefings. They create a mock commercial airline name tag with Captain Maya, 12 Charlie, Rivers, printed in official-looking letters. They present her with a toy Boeing 777 model aircraft with Saved by Viper, painted on the fuselage in the same style as nose art from World War II bombers. The ribbing is affectionate and relentless, the way fighter pilots acknowledge exceptional performance while maintaining egalitarian culture that prevents anyone from taking themselves too seriously or forgetting that they're part of squadron rather than individual heroes. So Viper, when you're done saving commercial flights, you think you might find time to fly combat missions with us mere mortals? Major Gunner Patterson, her squadron commander, delivers the line with perfect deadpan before his serious expression cracks into broad grin. Seriously though, you represented us perfectly. Professional, competent, modest, and effective. That's exactly what F-22 pilots should be. Well done, Captain. The praise from her squadron commander means more than any formal recognition because these are the people who truly understand what she does, who know that her response to the commercial emergency wasn't superhuman but simply well-trained, who recognize that she applied standard emergency procedures to civilian context because Marines adapt their skills to whatever situation demands professional response. These are her warriors, her tribe, the people who share the burden and privilege of flying the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built while knowing that their training must prepare them for scenarios they hope never to face but must be ready to execute perfectly if circumstances demand. 6 months later, Maya is cruising at 40,000 feet in her F-22 during a routine training exercise when air traffic control contacts her on emergency frequency with unusual request. Viper 1-1, we have a situation. Commercial aircraft 20 miles north of your position is reporting smoke in the cabin and requesting fighter escort for emergency landing. They specifically asked if you're available. Are you able to provide escort? Maya's heart skips as she recognizes what's happening. Word has spread through aviation community that she'll help commercial flights in trouble, that the F-22 pilot who saved Flight 2847 can be counted on to provide support if military aircraft are available during civilian emergencies. She checks her fuel status and weapons configuration before responding. Control, Viper 1-1 is able to provide escort. Vectoring to intercept now. What's their situation? Electrical fire in cargo bay, contained but still producing smoke. They're making emergency descent to Nellis. Crew is experienced but they specifically requested military escort and mentioned you by name after hearing your call sign. The controller's voice carries the kind of respect that Maya still finds uncomfortable because she doesn't consider herself exceptional, just trained to handle emergencies that her profession routinely prepares her for through constant drilling of scenarios designed to push capabilities to their limits. She accelerates toward the stricken airliner, her F-22 closing the distance with speed that commercial aircraft can never match, arriving at their position in minutes where it would take commercial traffic significant time to cover the same distance. She pulls alongside the Boeing 737 and establishes communication directly with their cockpit, her military precision immediately evident in tactical coordination that transforms isolated emergency into supported operation where professional aviator backs up commercial crew facing crisis they hope never to experience but train for constantly. Delta 447, this is Viper 1-1, United States Marine Corps. I have you visual. I'm going to escort you into Nellis. You're doing great. Maintain your descent profile and I'll coordinate with approach control to ensure you have priority handling. Maya's voice carries the same calm authority that steadied Rodriguez 6 months ago, the same command presence that transforms panic into professional focus, the same competence that comes from training that prepares her for scenarios far more demanding than electrical fires and emergency descents. Viper 1-1, this is Delta 447. We're honored to have you escorting us. We heard what you did on that United flight. Thanks for being out here. The Delta captain's voice carries gratitude mixed with relief that genuine expert backup is available during their emergency, even though he's perfectly capable of handling the situation with his own professional training and experience. Maya escorts them all the way to landing, her F-22 maintaining position off their wing through descent and approach until the commercial airliner touches down safely at Nellis Air Force Base, where fire crews stand ready to handle any residual issues from the electrical fire that created smoke but never threatened catastrophic failure. She executes a victory roll overhead after they land safely, traditional fighter pilot salute that acknowledges their professional performance while celebrating successful outcome to emergency that could have ended differently without proper execution of emergency procedures and coordination with military support. The Delta crew sends official letter of appreciation through channels, and Maya's squadron commander delivers it during the next briefing with the same irreverent humor that defines fighter pilot culture. Apparently Viper is now providing air rescue services to any commercial flight within 50 miles of her training area. Next thing we know, she'll be escorting school buses and helping little old ladies cross streets. But seriously, good work, Captain. You're showing everyone that our capabilities extend beyond combat operations and that F-22 pilots can be counted on to support any aviation emergency where our training and equipment provides value. Maya's complicated relationship with her unwanted celebrity status never fully resolves, but she gradually accepts that her actions created legacy beyond her personal preference for operational anonymity. She receives invitations to speak at aviation colleges about emergency procedures and crisis management. She mentors young women pursuing military aviation careers who cite her example as inspiration for their own service. She participates in public affairs events that the Marine Corps coordinates to demonstrate military training value to civilian audiences who fund defense spending through their taxes and deserve to see returns on that investment. But the moments she treasures most are the quiet ones, sitting in her F-22's cockpit during pre-flight checks, the familiar rituals of combat aviation grounding her in professional identity that transcends any individual emergency or recognition. Flying training missions with her squadron where she's just another pilot executing tactical maneuvers and coordinating with fellow aviators who know her as Viper rather than as celebrity pilot from news stories. Visiting her mother in Los Angeles and finally having the quiet time together that the original journey was meant to provide before crisis intervened and transformed routine travel into national news story. 10 years later, Maya achieves command of her own F-22 squadron, leading 30 pilots and 200 support personnel who maintain and operate the elite fighter aircraft that represent American air superiority capabilities. She's known throughout the fighter community not just for saving Flight 2847 but for the professional competence she demonstrates daily through training that prepares pilots for combat operations that hopefully never occur but must be ready to execute perfectly if national security demands military aviation capabilities that justify the enormous investment that produces F-22 pilots and aircraft. She still occasionally receives letters from passengers who were aboard Flight 2847, from people whose lives she saved through professional response to emergency that interrupted her travel and violated her preference for anonymity. Some letters thank her for the additional years they've lived because she stepped forward when crisis demanded expertise she possessed. Others describe life milestones, weddings, births, graduations, achievements, that occurred only because she brought them safely to ground when their captain collapsed and their first officer needed help beyond what single-pilot operations could manage. One letter arrives from Rodriguez himself, now a captain with his own aircraft command, writing to thank her for the mentorship she provided during their emergency and for the professional example that shaped his own development as aviator and leader. He describes how he teaches new first officers about that flight, about how genuine emergency revealed the importance of crew coordination and professional support networks, about how her calm competence during crisis showed him what leadership looks like when circumstances push people beyond their comfort zones and demand performance that exceeds what routine operations ever require. Maya keeps that letter in her desk drawer, reading it occasionally when the weight of command feels heavy or when she questions whether the personal sacrifices that military service demands, the anonymity lost, the privacy violated, the constant attention for moment on Flight 2847, justify the continuing burden that celebrity status creates. Rodriguez's words remind her that her actions created ripples extending far beyond immediate crisis, that 273 people continued living their lives because she did her duty when circumstances demanded, that professional example influences generations of aviators who benefit from seeing excellence in action during genuine emergency. She thinks about that Tuesday afternoon in March 2025 when she was just trying to visit her mother, when she was reading novel in seat 12C wearing jeans and casual jacket, when she was simply Maya rather than Captain Rivers or Viper or the F-22 pilot who saved Flight 2847. She remembers the moment of decision when Rodriguez's desperate announcement echoed through the cabin and she had to choose between comfortable anonymity and duty-bound service. She remembers unbuckling with determination that transformed her from passenger to pilot, from civilian to Marine, from anonymous traveler to revealed warrior whose hidden expertise suddenly became essential for survival of 273 people who had no idea they were flying with one of America's most elite aviators sitting quietly among them. She knows she made the right choice because Marines don't remain seated when duty calls, because pilots don't ignore emergencies when their expertise provides solutions, because oath of service means stepping forward regardless of personal preference when lives depend on capabilities that training provides. She knows that her preference for anonymity mattered less than her responsibility to use her skills when circumstances demanded, that her discomfort with attention mattered less than Rodriguez's need for professional support, that her desire for privacy mattered less than 273 people's need for someone capable of managing crisis that exceeded what standard commercial aviation training prepared their flight crew to handle alone. The warrior in 12C remained hidden until duty demanded revelation, until crisis required capabilities that only elite training provides, until lives needed saving and expertise existed to prevent tragedy. Maya Rivers answered that call because Marines always answer, because pilots always step forward, because duty always supersedes preference when service means the difference between disaster and survival. She flies her F-22 through crystal sky at supersonic speeds, executing tactical maneuvers that push both aircraft and pilot to their limits, training constantly for combat operations she hopes never to perform but remains eternally ready to execute with perfect precision if circumstances demand. She's a warrior first, a pilot second, and occasionally, when crisis requires and circumstances align, the guardian angel sitting quietly in seat 12C waiting to reveal that sometimes the most dangerous person aboard any aircraft is the one wearing jeans and reading novels while carrying capabilities that exceed everyone else's combined. That Tuesday afternoon in March 2025 proved that elite training creates value beyond combat operations, that military aviators adapt their skills to any crisis requiring professional response, and that sometimes the difference between tragedy and survival is measured in the specific expertise one Marine F-22 pilot brought to civilian emergency when her oath of service overrode her preference for anonymity and her tactical aviation capabilities proved essential for managing crisis that could have ended catastrophically without her intervention. Captain Maya Viper Rivers saved 273 lives that day not through superhuman abilities but through professional competence developed by training designed to prepare aviators for scenarios far more demanding than commercial emergencies. She brought honor to the Marine Corps, to the F-22 community, and to military aviation through modest professionalism that considers saving lives simply part of duty rather than heroic achievement deserving special recognition. But 273 people know better. They know they're alive because a warrior was sitting in 12C when their captain fell and their first officer needed help. They know that military training creates capabilities that justify investment through outcomes measured in saved lives and prevented disasters. They know that sometimes the quiet passenger reading nearby carries expertise that exceeds everyone else aboard combined, waiting patiently until crisis demands revelation and duty requires service. The warrior in 12C proved that day that Marines adapt and overcome, that F-22 pilots represent the pinnacle of aviation excellence, and that sometimes saving lives means sacrificing the anonymity you treasure because duty demands service regardless of personal preference. Maya Rivers answered that call with professional competence that transformed crisis into controlled emergency, with tactical expertise that managed impossible situations through training designed for scenarios far more demanding, and with modest humility that considered exceptional performance simply routine execution of skills any qualified pilot should possess. She remains uncomfortable with celebrity that continues a decade after that Tuesday afternoon, uncomfortable with attention that violates operational privacy she prefers, uncomfortable with recognition that elevates her individual contribution above the teamwork that actually saved Flight 2847. But she accepts that her actions created legacy beyond her control, that exceptional service deserves acknowledgement regardless of individual preference, and that sometimes being warrior means accepting consequences that come from doing duty when lives depend on expertise that training provides. The warrior in 12C continues flying combat missions in the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, continues training pilots who will defend America with capabilities developed through rigorous selection and demanding preparation, continues serving with distinction while maintaining modest professionalism that defines her character and honors her service. She's Captain Maya Viper Rivers, United States Marine Corps, F-22 Raptor pilot, and occasionally, when duty demands, the guardian angel in 12C whose hidden expertise emerges when crisis requires capabilities that only elite training provides.